Hey guys, it's Henry, and in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to use make.com to create a scenario to handle all payments through Stripe. And that's failed payments, new payments, and payments from new clients too, and all the actions that take place after that. So you don't have to do any of it manually. So what you want to do is set up this scenario inside of make.com, and we're going to use Stripe as the trigger. And the great thing with this is you can use the same trigger for all actions, whether that's a failed payment, a successful payment, or whether it's a new client payment and they need to be onboarded as well. So what we're going to start with is a Stripe payment watch trigger. And essentially that's just going to be a webhook that is going to wait for a new event to occur inside of Stripe. And you can set this to a variety of different things, but what we want to do is just wait for a new payment attempt to arrive inside of this scenario inside of Stripe. And it's going to be an instant trigger, so it happens automatically. Now, the one thing with this is it doesn't then automatically pull in the invoice details. So you might be missing some key details from that. So in step 2, then what we want to do is retrieve the invoice that's been taken from that payment, essentially. So we want to look for this step and look for the invoice down here. So that it's going to pull that invoice directly from Stripe. Next step, then we want to add this to Airtable. And the reason why Airtable is so good is because it's like a Google Sheet, but a lot more sophisticated, and you can do way more with it. So that's what I would recommend. And you want to, whether this is successful or failed, add it to your payments database, because you can then attach that information to each individual client, and you then got a record of all their payments in a single place along with their check-ins and call transcripts and so on. So we're going to, next step, add it to Airtable. I'm going to add it to my payments table. Then inside of this record, I've basically got an invoice number that I'm going to pull from the invoice here in step 2. We're going to leave the lead name blank, just because inside of Airtable, what we can then do is essentially automate that. So as soon as the email gets added, it then looks up the email and attaches it to the right client's profile. For today, I'm just going to show you this flow. Email address is going to come from here, the customer's address, customer's email address. The payment amount, we're then going to take from the object and amount down here. We're then going to add the status of it, currency of the payment, and we're going to add the payment ID as well. So we've got like a full and complete record there. So that's then going to be added to Airtable straight away. Next step, then we want to find the right contact. So we want to be able to basically trigger an action to update the client's record based on what happens next. So to find the right client, we're going to look up our CRM, which is a separate table inside of the same database. And what we're going to then do is look for their email address. This is key when you're looking to do this with Make and Airtable, the customer's email address that we've pulled from. So we can then take that and pull it into this next step here. So it's going to look for that exact email address. We're going to limit it to one. So we're just going to look for that one individual client. Next step, then we want to get the first name of the client taken from this. So we need to go to this step, and very simply, we're just going to use a simple ChatGPT 5 text prompt to extract the first name from a full name that's listed here. Now, you can use other things like text parsing or replace functions and that kind of thing, but for speed and simplicity, this is the simplest option. So I quite like it because it's just easy to do. Essentially, rather than having kind of complicated formulas set up, you just say, here's the full name, please just find the first name only. The next step, then we're going to route this based on whether the contact's been found or not in this step. So reason why this is important is if they haven't been found, then they aren't an established client, or they aren't in the database yet. Now, that would usually be for one of two reasons: because it's a first payment and that they haven't been added to the database yet, or it's someone who's attempted to pay and they haven't been added either. Either way, we need to follow up with this. So if we don't find the right contact, we can then create a contact inside of the database. Again, we can add the lead's name, the email address, and their client payment then gets added to their record straight away. And nice and simple, we've just created a profile for them. So rather than the issue being if someone isn't found, then either the make scenario just breaks or it doesn't know what to do next, you always want to have this backup so that if it doesn't get found inside of Airtable, you just make sure you're creating a profile, because that would obviously be an issue if we don't. Then we're going to do a secondary router, which is the payment status, whether it's failed or succeeded. Now, if it's a failed payment, what's going to happen here is we're going to look for the object status from step 1. And you can see, if we scroll down to here, is object status succeeded. So what we want to do for this one is put failed. So if failed, I'm going to make it case insensitive, just in case for whatever reason the formatting comes out differently. It doesn't really matter whether it's then capitalized or lowercase, uppercase, it's just the word failed we're looking for. Okay, we've put the word succeeded, and again, make sure it's case insensitive. So in this case, it's someone who has paid. They aren't in our database, so we need to create them a profile. We then need to send them down this path, update the contact with the right information. In this case, we know what the record ID is because we just created it in this step. So we've just created a new person, a new lead profile, so we can pull their ID from that step, and we can set them now to an active client because someone's just paid us. They are now an active client, but they just, for whatever reason, weren't in the database yet. And it might just be that someone's spoken to you offline, or you just haven't had a call with them, or for whatever reason, their different email address was used. So we just want to make sure we're creating a new profile for them, setting them as an active client, and attaching that payment, which we've got from back here, into their profile. Okay, and then finally, we want to send them an intake form. So if this person has paid, they're not in the database, so we create a profile for them, update the database to set them as an active client. Last of all, we want to make sure we're sending them an intake form to say, thanks for your payment, please fill in these key details here. I use an intake form with Tally, which has got e-signatures embedded, so it works quite nicely. You could have this as a different step, which would be to say, send a PandaDoc contract, or it could be to send a DocuSign contract, whatever step works for you next. But this is essentially what would need to happen. It's the first step in the onboarding. So we'd want to pull the recipient's email address to make sure they're getting the correct email. We're then going to say intake form and their name. And we're just going to have a HTML simple email saying, hi, the result from here. So we've got their first name. Thanks for your payment and welcome as a new client. Please now complete your intake form. Here's the link. That'll provide the necessary information to complete the project and then allow you to sign the terms of service. Nice and simple. And my signature attached to that email as well. So that would be that path. The other path then, if they, again, weren't found, they get added, but they had a payment which was failed, they would need to be notified that the payment has, of course, failed and what to do. So we're not having to chase up the failed payments. So the recipient email address, again, we've got. There was a problem with your payment. Again, let's change this actually to that first name. First name, getting that from this step. There was a problem with your payment for the amount from the payment. Please update your details using our payment portal. And then if you need any support, please contact us here. So again, nice and simple with the email signature, nice and professional. And just make sure we save that. So they then essentially get their notification that there's been a failed payment. They get an information around how to either change their payment details, or they maybe need to contact us because there's been an issue with their card or whatever it might be. But that way they've got instant support from us and we're not the ones having to chase it up. We've got this system just handling that use case. They get paid, we find the invoice, we add the details to Airtable. We're looking for them now inside of Airtable to find the right lead. We get their first name and we do find them inside of Airtable. The exact same thing happens, but we just at the end need to update their record with the payment and attach it to their record, if that makes sense. In this case, yeah, we found them, but the payment failed. So they're already in the database. We know who they are, but the payment failed. Again, we'll just need to update this slightly from earlier. So again, it's exactly the same process, but it's just going to be reflected in the fact that actually they're already in the database. So don't need to actually create a profile for them like in this path. Then if they are succeeded, but they're not an active client, then we need to send them an intake form and update the record as an active client. So in this use case, this would be someone who has paid, they're in the system, but they're not an active client in the database yet, who've probably had a call, or they've had an application, or they've joined your email list, or you've had some sort of interaction with them, and this is their first payment with you, and they're not an active client, it will follow through to this step and it will send them the intake form as it will do here, and then update them as an active client. So this essentially captures all those different use cases. Someone who is an active client and is just paying as usual, maybe on a monthly retainer or whatever payment processing you've got set up, because they're an active client inside of Airtable. Basically, you just add them their details to the payment records and attach it to the record, and that's it. If there's someone who is an active client, but they've had a payment failed, then we just add the payment details and notify them. If there's someone who isn't on the database and the payment fails, we create the profile and then send a notification that the payment's failed. And if lastly, they are someone who isn't in a database and it's their first payment successfully, then we send them the right details We send them the intake information, and we create them a record inside of Airtable. So that covers that use case as well. So this is the power of a system like this. It basically handles every use case in terms of payments, both successful and paid, both new clients and existing. And it just works in the background and you don't have to worry about the stuff. So you're not having to chase up and do all this admin that you would do normally. So this is both onboarding taken care of, it's failed payments taken care of, it's new clients, existing clients, and all your records nice and neatly stored inside of Airtable. If you are interested, down below there's a link and you can get 14 ways that you can save time around client admin using AI as an online coach. Click the link down below and I'll send you an email once a day, every day for 14 days.